Hi, this is John Pettigrew, and you're listening to Talking Through My Hat, a podcast that explores bookish businesses, the fantastic people who create them, and what those people have learned. I'm a hat wearer, a recovering editor, and the creator of Futureproofs, enabling editors and authors to work better online. To find out more, visit wearefutureproofs.com or follow me on Twitter at John_Pettigrew. Welcome to Talking Through My Hat. Today, we're doing something a bit different. It's episode 50 of this podcast, which is something of a milestone. I'm kind of amazed we've been doing this for a year. Thank you all for listening so much. So instead of interviewing one person today, I thought we might look back at some of the interviews we've done over the past year and pull out some of the lessons that I've drawn from that. And what I want to do today in our first Best Bits episode is to look at why people set up businesses, the different kinds of answers people have given. Because I knew why I did it, but it's been really, really interesting to see why other people have done it, how they got where they are. And I'll start with a couple of examples of people who had similar kind of experience to me, where starting a new business was very much triggered by a redundancy or something of the same sort. So first, we'll listen to Kate Wilson of Nosy Crow Books talking about why she sets up that business in episode 22 of the podcast.
Well, actually, you've missed out a critical bit. Ooh. Because I worked for Macmillan for 10 years, very happily. I was the managing director of the children's division there, and then I was the group managing director of Scholastic in the UK. But then I went to Hachette. I was headhunted to run an adult publishing business in Hachette. And I was fired after 5 months. So actually, I didn't have a safe corporate job. I didn't have a job at all. And so that's the unvarnished truth of it. So I didn't have a job. But doing that adult job certainly made me think about, I guess, two things. One was, I think it would be fair to say, my fairly constant theme of the challenge of being managed. I think I felt that I wasn't necessarily a natural employee. It turned out, and that had perhaps become truer the older I got, or maybe I was less willing to suppress more bullshit elements of myself, something like that. Anyway, I thought quite hard about corporates and about my experience within corporates, but it also made me think very hard about what I valued in children's publishing. I valued the community of children's publishing. I valued the content. I valued, and this is all going to get a bit tautological or meta, I valued the values. I realized that I really cared about the way that children's publishers have a freedom to think very hard about what it is we put into the hands of our readers. And we all care a lot about what we put into the hands of our readers. And so that sense that you are really thinking about something that you believe is worthwhile and does good in the world turned out to be an under-articulated motivator for me.
Kate is always a fascinating and inspiring person to listen to, I think. And that really resonated with my own experience, the story she was telling about how she got where she is. John Bond of White Fox had a similar sort of experience, as he explained on the podcast in episode 28.
Like lots of people who work in large corporates, I had a meeting with my CEO when we discussed a reorganisation of the business, and a decision was. I'm beating around the houses. No, I mean I was re-engineered out of the business, and I thought to myself, that's completely fine. And I've been doing this for 9 years, which was pretty much longer than anybody else around that boardroom. And I thought I really want to do something completely different, and I was at an age where I thought, well, it's an asset to have, a network and people that and hopefully people that you trust and like. And but I genuinely wanted to get my hands dirty doing something. I think you can be a long way removed from the content and the product in book publishing. And there's a lot of people. I remember going into a room once with the editor of Wolf Hall at a big corporate function within HarperCollins, and it was the night after the Booker Prize, and we were applauded into the room. And I thought to myself, well, I didn't commission that book. In fact, neither did the editor, because the editor, it had been a previous editor who commissioned the book.
Right.
I didn't design the cover, I didn't edit it, I didn't, and you get a lot of credit for things that you are actually quite a long way removed from.
Yeah.
And I thought I wanted to do something where I was slightly closer to whatever it was we were producing.
For some people, though, it appears they didn't even need that push of redundancy. It was the passion for doing something different that really drove them to set up their businesses. Emma Barnes, back in episode 3, described it as an escape story and even an epiphany.
That was a classic escape story. I needed to escape working for the man. I was at Deloitte, and that should be all the answer you need.
Wow.
Yeah, it was one of those epiphany moments where I realised that my life was being spent producing PowerPoint slides that would save a corporation 11 billion on their paper buying budget, and it was just what is the point? So I just had to stop doing that, or I could never have looked at myself in the mirror again. And independent book publishing seemed to be a pendulum swing reaction away from that sort of corporate life. But yeah, when I started Snowbooks, I realised that it was actually more about the corporate world that I did like, and I didn't want to leave behind. And independent publishing is not necessarily known for its, immaculate business processes or incredible rigour of approach to things. So I wanted to keep the good bits about working in a larger company. And before Deloitte, I'd been at the Kingfisher Retailer Group, which was where I was a buyer and supply chain logistician and that sort of thing. So, I enjoy process, but I also enjoy a bit of liberation and freedom. And I just assume that everyone has one of those epiphanies at some point in their working life when they realise that, their job is all pointless and why bother? And I think that people must divide themselves into two groups, those that, the scales have fallen from their eyes and they can't ever go back, or those that just kind of push it down and trudge forth. And maybe there are people who don't have the epiphany, but I don't see how it can be avoided.
In episode 34, Joanna Penn described how she had a very well-paying job that just didn't satisfy her, and she needed to escape that and do something different, which led to her becoming a very successful author and independent publisher.
Well, I hit 30. I mean, like many people, I fell into a job to pay off my student loan. And then sort of 10 years later, I was still doing that. And so I was very miserable in my job. And at the time when I really cracked, I was in Australia. I was implementing financial systems, accounts payable into a mining company at the time. And I was like, what am I doing with my life? This is, what is the point? I'm working, I'm making 6-figure income. I have a house and a mortgage and investments, and I am miserable. Yeah. I'm doing everything I'm meant to do with my life, and I hate it. And I've always been a reader, from a young age. I've always written journals, and writing was my job. I was writing technical specifications and that type of thing. And I was like, well, what if I take, I was reading so much self-help, so I thought, why don't I write a self-help book for myself and see if it actually helps anyone else. So that first book, which became Career Change. So I started writing in 2006. I published it myself in 2008. We can come back to why I went self-publishing from the beginning. But I then basically started my website, The Creative Pen, to share my lessons learned. And it took me another 3 years of part-time. So I went to 4 days a week. So this is a really good tip for people if they are wanting to transition. I went to 4 days a week with the consulting, and that extra day and the weekend and the evenings and the morning, I was able to build my business. So when I actually finally left my job in September 2011, I was making, over $1,000 a month, which wasn't enough to live on. But then within 6 months of going full time, I was able to make that enough to live on. And in 2015, I hired my husband out of his job. And now I make far more than I ever did as a consultant.
Another big thread that always comes across in these conversations is a feeling of frustration with the status quo, of needing to do something different because something is broken in the way that things work right now. And certainly Alison Jones of Practical Inspiration Publishing described that very clearly back in episode 7.
Well, I'm not sure there's anything terribly stable about corporates these days.
Well, it's true. It's true.
There's two answers to that. The quick answer is Macmillan was moving all its staff from its bases in Oxford and Basingstoke, which is where Palgrave was based, into a single campus in London. And we didn't want to move to London, basically. So it's as simple as that.
I can relate.
I was very, very lucky that I had 2 years of notification. So I had lots of time to think about the alternatives. Mm-hmm. The second answer is that I just thought publishing was broken. This is just a broken model. We cannot sell content for money anymore. This is not a long-term thing. It's reactionary. It's defensive all the time. It's an end game, and this is very unsatisfying as a way to live. This is not how I want to be. So I was going to just leave publishing, and I trained as a coach. So I was going to be a business coach. I did experiment with the whole life coaching thing. It turns out I'm a terrible life coach, really awful. Very, very good business coach. So that's what I was going to do. I was going to go into facilitation and mentoring and coaching. Yeah. And you have to do practice clients as part of your training. And every time a client discovered that I was a publisher, all they wanted to talk to me about was publishing their books. So I thought, this is interesting. So it sort of came
there's still something there.
Circle. Yeah. So now I set up the sort of Practical Inspiration in 2014 purely as a publishing services company, if you like. So this is, you want your book published. It's a business book. It's a book for your business. And therefore you want it to be professionally published and beautiful and credible. But you want the control. And you want to be able to give copies away if you want, because actually this is a marketing tool for you rather than a book per se, and that doesn't mesh well with most publishers' approach. Traditional
publishing model,
exactly, because all they want to do is make the maximum amount of revenue out of your book. So that these are two, goals in tension, if you like.
It's revenue from the book as opposed to revenue in the entire business.
Exactly. One new client from your business book will probably be worth more than your a year's worth of royalties. So your aims for the book and what you want to do with the book wouldn't necessarily fit with what a traditional publisher would want you to want for the book, which is maximise the sales revenue of the book. Yeah. So that was sort of where it came from, and it's grown over time, and it's now actually a hybrid publisher. I once you can take the girl out of publishing, but I decided actually I did want to have that kind of editorial control.
Similarly for Ken Jones in episode 8, there was this feeling of frustration of working in a big company, coming from a family background of print, and yet needing to do something different, something smaller for his own sanity, to get away from that environment and be more creative.
Well, I suppose it's frustration, and
I can relate.
I was the technical production manager and the in-house trainer for 10 years at Penguin. So Penguin and Dawn Kindersley, great company, lots of nice people. But when you get to a company which are literally the biggest publishing company in the world, there's only one move to make, and that's to go back small. And that's something that I always knew I wanted to do, because it gets rid of the frustration of the lack of speed, or I can't stop having great ideas. But when you're sitting, someone's just telling you we can't do that. That is a good idea, but we're never going to do it. That's eventually gets you sort of, it can grind you down.
And for Justo Hidalgo in episode 18, there was again this feeling he had a family history of running small businesses, and yet he needed to do something different because his own skills lay in a different area to those of the rest of his family, and his passions lay with books and with technology, and that's what led to 24 Symbols.
Well, I think there are many reasons. I mean, first, personally, I always wanted to build a company. Okay. So I come from a family where my parents always ran small businesses, and I kind of grew up seeing the difficulties, the challenges, the hard work.
A realistic view of what it might be like.
Yep. But at the same time, how my parents built something, let's say from scratch, providing value to the community. They started with a drugstore, and they started building driving schools, 1 and then 2 and then 3, and before they retired. So it's for me, it's part of my memories where I had to take chairs from my house to the driving school, because suddenly there are lots of people in the theory classes, and then the opposite, when there's some competition coming up and there's some struggles there in the family. But always, kind of looked at my parents, see how hard they work, and it's like, this is cool, no? But then I started, I did my computer science degree. I started working for companies, always small companies, but always like with a salary, and always had like kind of yeah, this is good, but I want to try to replicate what my parents did in a new way, of course, because I had other abilities.
You
need
to
parents
work on your own skill set and strengths.
Exactly. Yeah. My parents were great salesmen and things like that. I'm different, but I knew about computer science, so and that's one kind of my first reason. Then, more specifically, 24 Symbols, technology. In all the companies I worked for, technology was basically an end. So I spent many years working in a tech product company, doing data integration stuff, which has been really valuable for me afterwards in 24 Symbols. And I really enjoyed it. I got my PhD there, all that stuff. But I had the need to build something that people could use as a final result. Basically, what we were building there was a tool to build solutions. And I wanted to build that solution. And then I would say that the third reason is that thinking about that and related to what I just said, this idea of the Spotify for books at that time merged everything I really wanted. It merged technology, of course, because at that time creating a cloud reader, a subscription service with all the cloud DRM was technologically quite challenging. And at the same time, it was books. It was basically giving people books to read, which is something I've enjoyed all of my life. So, these three things plus working with my colleagues at that time, my partners, that I had worked with them in the past. One of them was a previous student of mine. With other, I had been like 15 years working together, made a lot of sense. So it was kind of the final push just to say, this makes sense. Then, of course, from a business perspective, it looked like people were talking, and that because you were at that time very deep, talking about subscription services in publishing. There were many doubts, but there was also many good opportunities. And we decided to give it a go.
For many other people, there seems to be a more personal challenge involved in setting up a business, a feeling of needing to change something about yourself, perhaps, or discover something about yourself. For Nancy Roberts, in episode 20, that was certainly the case.
I guess it's a really good question. I think I'd spent sort of 20 years in publishing, I guess. I'd done lots of interesting things, had lots of interesting roles. And I reached the point where I wasn't quite sure where I would go next. I couldn't see what was next for me. I couldn't really see a business that I wanted to work for. I couldn't really identify the next step. Yeah. And that sort of got me thinking, well, I need to then rethink a little bit and, take a bit of time out. So I decided that I wanted to do an MBA, which was partly to kind of help with that thinking. What am I really interested in? Where do I want to go next? Yeah. Are my kind of skills and interests transferable? All of those kind of things. And then through the course of that, I guess, on an MBA, you get a lot of kind of feedback and a lot of interaction with people from lots of different sectors. And people started saying to me, well, you're really passionate about diversity, about inclusion, but you also really care about publishing. And, you can see that there's a problem there. Is there somewhere that you can be in that kind of connection between your two interests that could be useful? So it kind of came out of that, really. It wasn't like a planned career move, but it sort of evolved, I guess, from the various sort of conversations I was having with myself about where I go next and what I want to do next.
In episode 29, Dominique Raccah of Sourcebooks described how she started her publishing business because she wanted to serve authors and because she felt that being a publisher would enable her to be behind the scenes. Part of that worked out really, really well, and part of it, as we probably know, she hasn't really been able to stay behind the scenes over the years, but has nonetheless built a very successful business.
I'm, as just a person, I'm a human being whose life has been dominated by books. So I think I can tell you the key decisions of my life in books, right? And so when I decided this is going to sound so funny when I tell people this part of the story. I came out of advertising and marketing. I worked for Leo Burnett. I was there 7 years. So I knew a lot about advertising and marketing. And I was deciding between publishing and advertising. And I chose publishing because I thought publishing was a service to authors and that they would be the people out front, and I would never have to be in front because I am pretty ferociously shy.
Okay, so that works out well.
Yeah, that has just, John, so you know, that didn't work out at all. I think the gods have a sort of a funny sense of humor.
Yeah. For Georgina Atwell of Topster, back in episode 33, again, there was this very personal need, a passion for flexibility in working, not just for herself, but for the whole of her team, as well as for harnessing communities to help children find better books.
I guess 3 main reasons. I'd always wanted to run my own business. In fact, I started what is now known as Topster back in 2009, and then got a call from Apple about running their ebook business. And it was a really difficult decision to make, but it was absolutely the dream job with a huge focus on editorial recommendations. And of course, Apple's an incredibly exciting company. So certainly in the early days, it was a bit like running my own business, but with the support of a big company behind you. But secondly, I'd reached a stage in my life where, despite being a complete workaholic, I wanted a bit of flexibility. Mm-hmm. I would describe myself as pretty ambitious, but I didn't seem to be able to find a job which provided the flexibility I wanted without sacrificing the seniority that I also wanted. And I think it's tragic how many working parents do fall off the career ladder just because they need some flexibility for their families. Topster is now a team of freelancers who work remotely and work pretty much whenever and wherever it suits them. Yeah. And I think if you've got a strong team and people you trust, asking them to work in a specific location or specific hours doesn't seem to make much sense. Yeah. So I knew that flexibility was going to be important for me as well. And then I guess I'd witnessed firsthand at Apple just how effective some publishers and some self-published authors were using social media for marketing. And I wanted to harness that to create a community where children could share their recommendations with each other. There didn't seem to be anything else out there that did that, particularly which stretched across the UK and brought together children from a variety of different backgrounds. Mm-hmm. I would still say that about 90% of our community are based out of London, and we're sometimes the first book that they have ever had at home. Wow. And it's really important to me that we reach those families in a fun and kind of engaging ways.
And for Bec Evans of Prolifico back in episode 17, there was something that was a side project that was turning out to be really successful, a hobby that was turning into a business, and the recognition of that was really important to her and to the way that the business really came to be.
I basically came across a problem that I was determined to solve. And I think often when you stumble across ideas, you have to kind of fit them in around your life. So having a side hustle is sort of a safe bet, but it got to such a stage where I had to kind of go all in, quit my job and commit fully to Prolifico. And that's what I've been doing for the last year.
Yeah. So what drove that decision to ditch the day job and actually say this mad idea is actually something I have to do?
Well, I've been working on it and doing research, and then bringing on board my co-founder, Chris Smith. We got to a stage where we were getting the traction. We were getting lots of users and realizing that there was really something in this and that it had the potential to be a business. And I think it's great having side projects and side hustles, but you get to a stage where you physically can't do everything all at the same time. Yeah. So it was, and making that commitment really helps grow a business as well.
So that's it for this episode, number 50 of the podcast. Thank you all so much for listening along to these interviews and conversations. I've had a great time doing them. We are going to take a bit of a holiday for the next couple of months. It's a very busy time for me at the moment, but we'll pick back up in the summer with some more interviews with some fantastic people from publishing, from the business world. So keep an eye on the feed and we'll pick up again in a few months. Thanks so much for listening. All the best. This was Talking Through My Hat, a podcast by John Pettigrew, founder of We Are Futureproofs. Please let me know your thoughts by leaving a review at Apple Podcasts or by commenting on the website, myhat.wearefutureproofs.com. You can subscribe to this channel at Apple Podcasts, Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. Our theme music is from hooksounds.com.